Hi, everybody, and welcome to my analysis of the Daniel Holtzclaw telephone interview. This interview was broadcast as a segment on 2020. It was part of a larger documentary that they were doing on the crimes and trial and conviction of Daniel Holtzclaw. Rather than risk a copyright strike by actually playing portions of the interview, I've just pulled a few quotes that I want to talk about because they're really excellent examples of the techniques of statement analysis, what people say, the words people use, and what they really mean. So let's start with this first one. This is really the overarching umbrella denial. I have never sexually assaulted anyone. Now, to the uninformed, that sounds like a pretty standard, reliable denial, right? But it isn't, and I want to talk about why it's not. To have a reliable denial, you need three things, and you have to have all three. You need it to be in the past tense, you need it to be in the first person, and you need it to be specific to the event in question. Okay, so for example, if someone says, I would never rape anyone, okay, that's not in the past tense. That's in the conditional. And you're going to get that a lot. If you listen to interviews of people who have been accused of very serious crimes. Jodi Arias was one. She constantly, throughout her interviews with police, and her interviews went on for it seemed like years because she just won't shut up. She would say things like, I would never hurt Travis, right? It wasn't, I didn't murder him. It was, I would never do that in the future, right? So you can't rely on that. Then there's the first person. Corporations are notorious for violations of this order, mistakes were made when we released those tires that blew up and killed people, right? Mistakes were made. There's no, in that case, there's no first person, but it's a corporation, so there's not even that all-inclusive we. It's just mistakes were made. And then there's event specific. So, for example, saying, I didn't do that, or I didn't do this, is not as reliable as someone saying, I did not steal the money, for example. So we need all three of these components for reliable denial. So let's see what we have here with Holtzclaw's denial. I have never sexually assaulted anyone. So he has the first person there. That's good. I have never sexually assaulted anyone. Have. In this case, this counts as a past tense, right? It would be better if he had said, I did not. But I have never, it is still in the past tense. So I'm going to give him that. But then we get to the third part. I have never sexually assaulted anyone. Okay. First off, actually, I should have highlighted the word never too, because I kind of have a problem with never. When you say you've never done something, you're not denying a specific event or a specific series of events. You're making a blanket statement about your entire past up till this point, which is less reliable than a specific, I did not hit him on Tuesday, right? But the big problem is with sexually assaulted anyone. First off, sexual assault is a very, very, very broad term that can have different meanings to different people. So someone would have to ask him, well, what do you mean by sexually assault? Because for some people, sex assault means penetrative rape. For others, it could mean simply forcefully, forcing someone to kiss you or kissing them forcefully, or it could mean any act in between those two extremes. And the big problem is with the word anyone. And this is where his denial totally falls apart. The word anyone. Because it truly encompasses the whole world. He has never, ever, and will never, I don't think, issue a reliable denial on a victim-by-victim basis. He will never say, for example, I did not force Janie Liggins to fillet me. Okay? Or I did not force Janie Liggins to expose her breasts. Or I did not compel her to pull her pants down. And he would have to go case by case by case because he has multiple victims. To say that I have never sexually assaulted anyone implies, okay, well, he didn't take out the phone book and close his eyes and kind of just turn to a random page and pick a person and then go and commit a crime against them. We're talking about 13 specific women who accused him of acts ranging from forced exposure of private areas to forced oral sex to forced full-blown vaginal rape. Saying, I have never sexually assaulted anyone. For example, if I were to tell you that, okay, that would be true. But I haven't been accused of specific crimes. Here you have to consider the source. You have to say, okay, well, this is a man who is giving an interview from prison after being sentenced to hundreds of years in prison for specific things. And he has the opportunity now to refute these specific allegations, these specific charges. And he has not done that. So that's not a reliable denial. Moving on. Let's get the factual facts out there. She's not innocent the way people think she is. She had a bust in the 80s, but we couldn't present that to the jury. This is not a woman that's, a soccer mom or someone that's credible in society. If they didn't convict me, there would be the next Ferguson deal happening in Oklahoma City. Okay. Now, he's referencing his final victim, the final girl, Janie Liggins. All right. Let's get the factual facts out there. Well, facts are by nature factual, right? A fact that is not factual is not a fact. It's a lie. It's a fabrication. But what he's saying here is that he is going to determine what the facts are. Not the jury, even though that's the jury's legal duty, is to determine what evidence is fact and what is not. Let's get the factual facts out there. She's not innocent the way people think she is. Okay, so now he is telling you that he knows how people think. He, Daniel Holtzclaw, believes that he is qualified to tell you what everyone else thinks. Right? She had a bust in the 80s. Yes, she was arrested once. It was some kind of a drug bust. She was never charged. She never went to court for it. She never went to prison or jail. She was simply arrested in the 80s. And I looked online when I was getting ready to make this video to try to get the precise date, the year of that arrest, and I couldn't find it. But Holtzclaw was born in 1986. So this bust was either before he was born or before he was in kindergarten. But despite that, he feels entitled to say, this is not a woman that's, a soccer mom or someone that's credible in society. So now not only is he the final arbiter of what a fact is, and he can tell you the way that every other person thinks, but now he is the person who gets to determine who is credible and who is not in society. This is the arrogance of the sociopath here. If they didn't convict me, there would be the next Ferguson deal happening in Oklahoma City. So basically he's implying here that the only reason that the jury convicted him was to avoid some kind of race riot. Utterly, utterly ridiculous. He's given a chance in this interview to refute the charges, and instead of doing that reliably and issuing a reliable denial, what he's doing is he's smearing his final victim, and he's smearing her in particular because she is the first one to really kind of make noise about this and get the case investigated. So that's why the bulk of his fury is directed at her. And he has to delve almost 30 years into the past to find her one arrest, and based on that feels entitled to determine if she should or should not be believed. Utterly ridiculous. Okay, final quote. The fact is, when you approach these women, so now he's talking about the other victims, and say, we have a tip that you've been sexually assaulted by an Oklahoma City police officer based on the area that I worked in and the environment and the atmosphere that I worked at. You should know that these women in these lifestyles, that's basically giving them a lottery ticket to say yes. All they had to do was say yes, and then you're going to file charges on me, and now they're going to be billionaires. All right. Again with the facts. He is the final arbiter of what a fact is. Not the police, not the jury, nobody else but him, right? The fact is, when you approach these women and say... Now, what happened was, just to give you a little bit of background, if you're not totally familiar with the case, after the initial allegation was brought to the police, and he was interrogated. In the ensuing days, the police went through all of his activity records to find out, what women he had had interactions with. Sorry, my phone's just blowing up. They went through, and then they talked to these women. And several of them said, actually, yes, this did happen to me, right? Based on the area that I worked in, and the environment and the atmosphere that I worked at, you should know that these women in these lifestyles. So here he's now omnipotent in telling you what you should know. And if you don't know, he's saying, well, you should know. Shame on you, right? So this is a subtle way to pressure you into accepting what he's saying without questioning it. It's kind of like when someone says the word obviously, which is another red flag in statement analysis. Whenever somebody says, well, obviously this or obviously that, what they're trying to do is push it on you so you'll accept it without looking at it critically. You should know that these women in these lifestyles, that's basically giving them a lottery ticket. So he is lumping all of his victims together into a single, subhuman entity, basically. All they had to do was say yes, and then you're going to file charges on me. Now, this is, again, patently ridiculous. As a police officer himself, right, what he's actually doing is he's denigrating himself as much as he is other police. Because he's actually not implying, he's straight up saying that someone can make a claim that they've been sexually assaulted or raped, and that automatically charges are filed, which is bull honky. Right? That's not how it works at all. And when charges are pressed that are not meritorious, that's why, before you actually go to trial, there's a whole series of hearings and motions and stuff that goes on. And the goal of many of those is to weed out stuff that simply has no merit. Cases get thrown out all the time. Okay? That doesn't mean that every case that goes to trial has merit, and it doesn't mean that every person who says they're a victim really is. Of course not. But bear in mind, he was not convicted of all of his charges. He was convicted of a little bit more than half. So all they had to do was say yes, and then you're going to file charges on me. Well, if he's calling the police corrupt in that sense, he's also calling himself corrupt, right? Because he has this insider information, right? He was a lawman. So to insinuate that anybody who claims to be a victim like that, automatically that there's charges filed, is preposterous. The reason why he is making all of these just outlandish, over-the-top, hyperbolic claims is because he has no substance to deny based on fact or evidence. So all he can do is scream corruption and try to smear and besmirch the reputation of his victims. That's all he has, so it's kind of what he has to do, because certainly he's not going to come out in his 2020 interview and admit guilt, because he's got appeals pending. Okay. So, my reason for publishing this video is not... It's not specifically about Holtzclaw. It's more about getting people to look at the words that are really said and to think critically about them. Don't accept things as being true or accept things as being factual until you truly analyze the words that people use. And we're going to talk a lot more about this on this channel. We're going to talk a heck of a lot more about it. Because we have a terrible tendency, now more than ever, I think, to make snap judgments about things and then to decide if we believe something or not without really thinking about it. And that's a big, big, big mistake. Really, really big mistake. We have to relearn how to stop and how to listen critically and actively rather than just hearing. We have to really listen. And then we have to analyze what's said, and then we can begin to kind of get an idea in our mind of what is really going on. So, anyway, if you made it to the end of this video, thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you shortly in the next clip. Bye bye.